Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak in support of amendments new clause 14, new clause 15 and 11, which at their core support a just transition for North Sea oil and gas workers by removing barriers that they face in transitioning into renewable energy and ensuring that they're able to access the support and training needed. And I may push clause 14 to a vote if necessary. In recent weeks, ministers have emphasised the need to support, quite rightly, oil and gas workers. However, they've done this by resorting to more investment in extraction in the North Sea, which contradicts the advice of the International Energy Agency and threatens the ambition of the Glasgow Climate Pact to limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. Now, research published in 2020 by Friends of the Earth Scotland, Platform and Greenpeace shone a light on the experiences of offshore oil and gas workers, and I'll come to some of their comments in a minute. And they revealed a high level of concern about employment, job security and working conditions. Yet it also showed a significant appetite to be a part of the transition to a zero-carbon economy, with over 80% of those surveyed workers saying that they would consider moving to a job outside of the oil and gas industry, and over half choosing to transition into renewables and offshore wind if they had the opportunity to retrain and were supported in doing so. Now, amendments new clause 14 and new clause 15 would help this ambition to be realised, whilst ensuring that in achieving our climate goals, we do not leave communities behind and repeat the mistakes of the past. Now, the ministers, in their response to this, may point to the North Sea transition deal, which was announced by the government last year. However, in reality, this initiative has failed to provide any real support for workers to transition into renewables, either in terms of investment or policy. Unfortunately, training, as it stands, is a barrier and not a passport to future success. Training certificates for wind, energy and the oil and gas industry are not transferable between the sectors. Or are they recognised by the two separate training standard bodies, OPITO and the Global Wind Organisation, with both claiming that their training courses are too specific. Now, this means that offshore workers seeking to transition into renewables from oil and gas are required to complete entirely new training courses, which often come at a prohibitive cost. This is an insurmountable barrier for workers who are already paying an average of £1,800 a year out of their own pockets to maintain their training and safety qualifications. While there are some courses that are unique to different environments, many cover core skills that run through the offshore energy sector, including first aid, fire safety and working at heights. Rather than narrowly focusing on courses, we should move to a skills-based approach with standardised training where it's possible to have top-up training available for specific environments. Now, one person who was spoken to about this very issue, Paul, is an offshore oil and gas worker, and he says very clearly the biggest problem that faces the energy workforce wanting to make the transition from offshore oil and gas to renewables is the cost of the extra training needed. Some of the renewable training bodies, training is essential, but most of it is a duplication of the courses used in offshore oil and gas. Now, these comments are reinforced by Jack, another worker, who says, I've thought about working in renewables, but that'd be thousands of pounds you'd have to pay to work in both industries. It's just too much. It costs an absolute fortune just to stay in one sector. Shelling out this money does cause stress, and it does have an impact on your family and your living costs. There's lots of people worrying about how they're going to pay the mortgage. This situation simply cannot go on. Before recess, government announced that they were hitting the accelerator on low-cost renewable power by moving to annual contracts of difference auctions. Yet, to genuinely realise this ambition, offshore workers must be supported to transition into renewables, not face multiple barriers to do that. This is a skilled workforce whose knowledge and experience are absolutely essential if we're to achieve the UK's climate goals in a timely manner. So what will these amendments do? Well, Amendment New Clause 14 would require the Secretary of State to produce and implement a strategy to achieve the cross-sector recognition of core skills and training in the offshore energy sector and ensure that training standards bodies adopt a transferable skills and competency-based approach to training. Crucially, this strategy would apply to all workers, whether they are directly employed or contract workers, and they would have to be consulted in its development. This amendment would enable oil and gas workers to access jobs in renewable energy. It would also mean that whilst there are not sufficient jobs in renewable energy as capacity continues to be built up, workers are able to take contracts in both sectors and then move between them. And it would prevent a skills drain as people leave the energy sector altogether due to difficulties with finding work and the cost and time involved in maintaining training certificates. Now, Amendment New Clause 15 is complementary and would establish a retraining guarantee for oil and gas workers seeking to leave the sector, thereby supporting them in transitioning to green energy jobs. It would also ensure that they are able to access advice on suitable jobs based on their existing skill sets, as well as the funding and training needed to transition. Again, all oil and gas workers are eligible for the retraining guarantee, as well as those who have recently left the sector. This amendment would provide clear pathways for oil and gas workers into clean energy, meaning they're not left behind in transitioning to a zero-carbon economy. It would also mean infinitely more affordable. It would also be infinitely more affordable if also accompanied by Amendment 14, meaning that workers are not required to duplicate training courses. Whilst Amendment 11 would ensure that the new clauses are applicable to Scotland, which is, of course, essential in order to facilitate a just transition for workers in the North Sea. So these amendments are backed by those workers who operate in this industry. They crucially reflect the concerns of workers and their call for cross-sector recognition of skills and training. 94% of respondents to a 2021 survey of offshore workers said they would support an offshore passport, which licenses accredited workers to work offshore in any sector through a cross-industry minimum training requirement. An offshore training passport is also backed by the RMT and Unite Scotland. These organisations have also called for the establishment of a training fund for the offshore passport as part of the North Sea transition deal. The RMT is backing these amendments. As Lewis, a drilling consultant, no relation to myself, from Aberdeen, with 40 years of experience in the oil industry, says an offshore passport would be a fantastic thing. I think it's absolutely brilliant and essential for my future. As it stands, the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill is a missed opportunity for climate. A recent Green Alliance report revealed a significant skills shortage in every major sector of the economy, from energy efficiency to battery manufacturing to the energy industry. This bill could have been an opportunity to close the green skills gap and prepare us for the zero-carbon economy of the future. During the second reading of this bill, the Secretary of State said, "Skills are about investing in people all across our country and about strengthening local economies." These amendments deliver just that, ensuring that offshore oil and gas workers are able to gain the training and skills they need to access good green jobs, whilst ensuring that we support communities affected by the UK's transition to a zero-carbon economy, maintaining vibrant local economies. These amendments also complement the objectives of the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill to ensure everyone, no matter where they live or their background, can gain the skills they need to progress in work at any stage of their lives and to increase productivity, support growth industries and give individuals to progress in their careers. I hope that the government looks closely at these amendments and recognises that there is much more that they need to do in order to genuinely support oil and gas workers and make a just transition in this sector a reality. I will give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way, and I'm grateful to him also for adding his name as a lead sponsor to this amendment. I think he's made a very important point, and coming off the back of COP26 and all the warm words that we heard at that. Does he agree with me that for the government over the courses of the next 6 months to simply publish an energy sector skills strategy, not expecting it to go any further than that at this stage, but simply to show that it has a plan, is the very least that people listening to the warm words from the Prime Minister at COP26 would expect?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I agree with him entirely. And I think, look, we can already see before the ink is dry on the COP26 agreement that there's backtracking going on from this government. And I think we only have to look at history. Many on the other side of the chamber will look to what happened in the 1980s and the demise of the mining industry to say, well, look, we were the first to ensure that we decarbonised our economy. Well, actually, this was a tragedy. If you look at what's happened in deindustrialisation, if you look at what's happening in the mining industry, you can see that actually the whole reason for the levelling up agenda and its necessity is because there wasn't a just transition. And this is an opportunity for us to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes that we have in the past, and we also play our part in making sure we get to net zero in a timely manner. And I think that would be what most people in this House and out in the country would want. And on that, I shall finish, Mr. Speaker.
Lynn Sagby.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.